Hello, colleagues, and welcome to the next episode of DINCast, where I'm delighted to be joined by Glen Robinson, who is the National Technology Officer for Microsoft. And welcome along today, Glen. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we're going to talk a bit today about the future for sort of tech strategy, which I assume is going to be quite challenging in the current environment, but we'll see how we get on with that. But for those people who don't know you, don't know what the National Technology Officer at Microsoft actually does, would you just sort of like to explain a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So and firstly, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Um, yeah, I've had I guess an interesting journey over many years. So I've been in this cloud computing space for over 12 years now. So firstly, I led a cloud-based strategy which enabled an organization facing massive disruption at the time to really sort of fight back and hold their position and actually grow on a global scale. So that was quite successful. In fact, it was so successful that I got a call from this small organization called Amazon who said, we're building out this cloud computing thing in the UK, and do you want to be a part of that? So I did. And I was employee number 4 in the UK into AWS. Even back in those days, it was such a nascent entity in the UK. It was quite exciting. So working for the world's biggest startup. I did that for nearly 5 years, helping them develop and build out their business. Again, mainly driving the sort of technology focused areas of the business in the UK. I left there. We had a great time there, very successful. That's all good news. And then I joined a large global systems integrator that equally was fixated on how do we transform from being a traditional IT outsourcing organization to a new cloud services provider company. I spent a couple of years there. We drove the transformation, and again, that was going so well. I found a lot of my time spent with sort of the top senior execs in these slow-moving organizations. So I transitioned into an executive advisory organization. I spent a few years there, and again, that was really great fun, traveling around the world, really mobile, giving that strategy, technology advice to execs. And then almost exactly a year ago to the day, Microsoft come calling and they said, Glenn, we've got this National Technology Officer role. Do you fancy it? And I was like, I have no idea what one of those is. So yes, to answer that part of the question, this role takes what I understand about technology, but it really intersects with policy, regulation, and legislation. So how are government currently thinking about technology and the effects that might have, and how we need to do things like protecting individual privacy through the use of information, things like that. So I work at that intersect. I guess I'm the technical diplomat for Microsoft in the UK, and I love it. It's great.
A great way of sort of describing that, sort of a diplomatic sort of IT lead. And I suppose it sort of raises a question in my mind, and I've had this discussion with DIN members before, that is the role of IT, do you see it sort of changing now? Because, in the past, it's very much seen as a sort of support role, but with the emergence of all these fantastic new technologies and cloud and things such as that, is the role of IT changing more to a strategic nature?
Yeah. So it's also having to do more of that. So I don't think it's binary. And I think if I think over the years of advisory and working with executives and organizations, that their question has been like, what is it we've now become? And I say, well, I don't think there is a one size fits all model. If I look at industries as a whole, for many, many years, we've had the digital disruption wave. So the enablement of technology, allowing new entrants coming into a marketplace, significantly disrupting the incumbents. And then, you have the famous stories of, Kodak and Woolworths and Blockbuster all going bust, right? And now Netflix and digital cameras are all the like most popular things. So it's not that one size fits all approach. I think we need to think about it more broadly. I also think that people need to be more aware of technology and the role it plays, and now it's that sort of build versus buy. I think where IT was this sort of central service function for the most part, but by its design, it's focused on efficiency and standardization, and that's what the organization wanted from it. Well, now you're getting all that from cloud computing. You're getting that economies of scale, you're getting that standardization, you're getting that efficiency. But what didn't happen always is the internal IT department didn't evolve with that. They didn't sort of then learn how to leverage that technology most effectively, and they didn't re-establish their own roles and responsibilities. And now part of that new role and responsibility indeed will be around better alignment to the organizational outcomes, and then how do they create a technology strategy, the use of technology, the ability to leverage that technology, driving the right skills. And they're the sorts of things that more commercial organizations for many years have had to face. But now we're seeing public sector, so where there isn't the threat of competition or disruption, and equally in regulated industries. So if you imagine commercial entities were the first to get disrupted for the most part, then we've had those suffering from regulation and compliance. Now that is starting to catch up, and now they're finding that they're able to be disrupted. So big financial services right now, they're becoming disrupted. Lastly, you've got the organizations with no competitive threat at all. And now they're suddenly finding actually that it's not competition that's forcing them to transform. It's the demands of us, the citizens, are saying, you just need to do a better job. And there's global pandemics that we can't respond to quickly enough. And we haven't got the systems and we can't share the data, and we need better services.
It's a really, really good point. And I suppose coming on the day that we're sort of hearing about the demise of Topshop because of their lack of investment in technology and moving with the times kind of thing, the risk is there for all to see. I suppose the way I would sort of view it is that, as you mentioned about citizens, particularly citizens within social housing, they will be judging housing providers in the same way that we judge service providers. So if we're getting a good experience from one company who's invested massively in the digital technology, they're going to expect and judge a housing provider in the same way. Is that how you see sort of the market developing in an area where there is limited competition?
Yeah, indeed. I'm thinking, and it's just sort of reminded me actually of sort of areas of government now where we're having conversations, and they're quite interested in sort of customer satisfaction, which has never always been a key metric. Whereas if you go into sort of telco or somewhere like that, customer sat is everything, right? If you're not providing these stellar service to your customers, not just a product, but a service wrapper on top of that. Whereas there hasn't always been that sort of focus. And now they're sort of taking a much more almost a retail perspective on things like what's the user experience for the individual, how satisfied are they in the execution of the process that we're doing on their behalf. So those sorts of things are becoming even more important.
So you mentioned you've only been here just over a sort of a year now. So for most of that time, you've spent it dealing with sort of the pandemic, and I just wondered how much of your views or the way that you were looking to operate have had to change as a result.
Yeah, it's a really good question. One I sort of have to reflect on almost, because I guess coming into the business, my role previous to Microsoft, I've always been a mobile worker. So as an individual, I've always had that autonomy, flexibility, working from anywhere. I've had the digital tools. I've had to learn how to maximize the benefit of those to be able to do my job from a seat in an airport or on a plane or on a bus somewhere for the most part. And now suddenly pretty much everyone around us is faced with the same challenge. How do I work from home? I need to collaborate on these data sets in a secure and managed way, but suddenly I'm at home, I'm on an unmanaged network, I could be using an unmanaged device. There's no clear demarcation for me turning up to the office and going home at night and getting on with my life. It's now just one and the same. So I think there's a few observations. One is that I've had years of doing this personally, but for most people, especially our customers, they're coming to this fresh. They've worked in an office 5 days a week. They've had to commute. They have that discipline and separation of work and life for the most part, or to a degree. But now they've lost most of that. So how can we quickly accelerate them and help them? So indeed, what we've spent a lot of time doing is writing a lot of those principles around good homeworking. We've done lots of research in this space to find out the challenges that people really have. A lot of that's driven our own innovation in the technology, things like Microsoft Teams, to enable that collaboration to happen more effectively with these concerns and worries in mind. And then that links quite nicely to the other bit in terms of the teams that I work with and across. How are they doing? What's their well-being whilst all this is going on? Because suddenly during COVID, all my colleagues, and me included, we've had homeschooling and all of us have been stuck in the same four walls day in, day out. How's that affecting people? And what sort of different support do they need today that maybe we weren't giving them before? And how can we highlight that and create opportunities for them to voice this, and then ensure that we can provide the right programs to help them deal with that? And again, we've learned a lot as an organization. We had a lot of that in place, kind of very mobile workforce. And now I think we're finding more and more we can take those learnings and really sort of deliver them to our customers in the form of, white papers, events, and all that good stuff where we can talk about this in detail. And a lot of that has driven the actual innovation around our tools to enable these better work experiences.
And that, again, you raise a good point there about, how organizations now understand how the work gets done. And I just wondered, from a Microsoft experience, how do you use, or what do you use in terms of people and workplace analytics that gives you confidence that, as you say, your team well-being is okay, the work's being done, people are being productive? What does that Microsoft experience look like?
Yeah. I mean, I guess we look at it a few different ways. So there's the well-being aspect. So we have something called workplace analytics, and that is sort of an aggregated view on data. So if you're using tools like Microsoft 365, so Teams, Office, Word, stuff like that, email, we're able to, at an aggregate level, see people's interactions, so who they're interacting with, but equally at what sort of times are they interacting. So very quickly, as a manager, I'll be able to say that, hang on, it looks like in my team that actually 30% of emails sent from my direct reports are going out of normal office hours, which, if that might raise an alarm bell with me if I was a manager, thinking, hang on a minute, that can't be a good thing for these people. But actually there's still another like 20% that's happening over weekends. So is the workload too demanding? Are the stakeholders they're interacting with not available during the hours? What are the actual fundamental problems of our business here? And what can I do as a leader in that business to help them to reduce this impact so it's not always on? So we have those sort of well-being perspectives. We do have sort of a productivity view on the world as well, but that's more aimed at IT admins. So is your organization getting the value from these tools? Are they using them in a way that's enabling them to do the sort of collaboration that's taken me sort of, many years to sort of build these habits and ways of working as the technology's evolved? Are people getting the best of that today? And again, this is more about where can we invest from a skilling point of view? Where do people lack the capabilities to learn to get the best out of these tools? So there's different ways of looking at it, but yeah, and again, all of our technology sort of surfaces those data points to allow organizations to drive that insight, to apply the right fixes to these new challenges that many of us are facing.
So just picking up on that point, Glenn, because obviously a lot of people will have been recruited now and onboarded, during sort of lockdown, so they won't necessarily have had that personal sort of contact. And I just wondered, because it's a question I've been asked before, how do you get across the Microsoft culture and way of working in a distributed world where you're not physically in a room with people? How difficult has that been? And have you got any tips or advice for how you could help people get on board with the culture?
Yeah, it's such a great question, because actually before I joined Microsoft, it was something that I was keen to understand better myself. So what type of organization am I joining, and what are their values, and how do they manage these sort of sensitive balances? And quite simply put, our CEO, Satya Nadella, wrote a book called Hit Refresh. And I would, I don't get commission from selling this book, I promise you, but it was one of those books that every now and then you read. And pre-Microsoft, even before having a job offer on the table, a long time before that, I read this book, and it was one of those things that really changed the way I think about just things, right? Very, very generally, there's a lot of really good guidance in it on how he drove that change in such a large global organization. A lot of that is about um, the values of our organization. So it's about trust, it's about integrity, it's things like that. And he knew he had to lead from the front. So he's like, look, I trust everyone implicitly, right? So you've now got that trust. So I'm going to enable you to work flexibly, and that's going to be reflected in our working from home policy. You can now just work flexibly. So it all flowed down, whether it's HR into financing, things like expense policies suddenly changed and got overhauled because, again, they trusted us. So but when you have that trust, it enabled people to start then trusting each other, to build these more sort of social connections, and then start collaborating. And I think, it didn't happen overnight. It's taken many, many years. It needed sort of a bottom up approach in terms of, here's how we want you to think about our culture as a business. But absolutely, it took that the top leadership in our organization to define that, and then sort of model that themselves as well. So to sort of show that every single day that this is how we expect you. And we've done actually something quite similar. So you mentioned COVID. What I found is people were worried that they were worried now that suddenly at 3 o'clock they no longer had childcare and had to go and pick up their child from school. So what we did recently is we jumped on a call with our whole public sector division, and we shared the calendars of me and some of the other leadership team. And in there it has quite clearly, go and pick your son up from school. I'm like, I have to do it because I don't have to childcare. So I'm going to model and I'm going to demonstrate by example that this is allowed, right? That this is fine. This is the new world we work in. We trust you. You're still going to go and get the work done. So things like that, really went a long way by demonstrating, but by, through examples.
Really good insight there, Glenn. And I know that sort of part of your role again is this, horizon scanning, helping leaders work on the business, not necessarily in the business. And I just sort of thought, turning to what a post-pandemic organization would look like. Where is your thinking now about, how, for example, tech strategy is going to have to change as we move into this sort of post-lockdown world?
Yeah. I guess that's the eternal question for most people right now. So it's a really good one. I think we covered a little bit of this earlier. So I think most organizations, is from a tech strategy point of view, have been focused on efficiency and standardization. So it's about what is our new role. So COVID has shown us once again, and this isn't the first time we've had one of these systemic shocks. We've had financial crashes, we've had technical disruption, that it's coming all the time, and the pandemic's just another one of those shocks that's affected, this time different organizations to the ones we've seen historically. But the need for agility. So where are you agile in your organization? I think it's the big question I'd be asking everyone right now. If you're built for efficiency, like operational efficiency and standardization, that's only a small part of what you now need to achieve. And actually you should be able to get a lot of leverage from big technology companies like mine. Equally, there's a massive ecosystem out there of others that can bring that very agile approach into your business. You don't have to create it natively, you can leverage that as well. So what is your role in that? So I think that's one part, this sort of shift to agility. We've covered the other bit, which is a focus on employee well-being. So I think that's come out through COVID, where now it's a first-class citizen in terms of a conversation that we're having at executive level with most of our customers, how they can do a better job of that. Cross-agency collaboration is the other. So the value of data and information exchange, and that's why I think for your network that this is such a relevant conversation. So living in these silos, you can't get that leverage of all that insight. You need to collaborate more effectively across those multiple groups. You have to be able to draw those patterns and observations quickly, find out what's working well in some of those dusty areas, and then apply that to yourself really quickly in an agile way. So that cross-agency collaboration is another one. And then lastly, the big one that again we're helping a lot of our customers understand better is sustainability. So we've seen from government that a 10-point plan, the amount of investment going in there, we've seen the public procurement notice around social value. There's a lot of focus government are now putting on this, which is great. And companies like mine are absolutely fanatical around sustainability and what we're doing around things like carbon emission, freshwater usage, waste that we produce, and how we manage all that. So we've made some significant commitments about being carbon negative by 2030, waste neutral. So we're going to essentially introduce a lot of recycling for all the computer technology, and water positive. So we're going to add more fresh water than we consume as an organization. And that's also across our supply chain. So this is a really complicated thing. That's not just our own consumption of those, energy or water or materials. It's how do we manage that across a supply chain and get the data that we need and the measures in place to make sure that we're all doing a good job, that our customers, when they buy our services, everyone in that supply chain contributes to this outcome of making a more environmentally friendly technology organization.
So as I say, as a national technology officer, you clearly work across a lot of different sectors and sort of types of business and that. And I just wondered, from a personal point of view, which sort of sectors excite you most about some of the technologies or some of the innovations that they're working on that you've come across that we might start to see coming in over the next year or two?
Yeah, this is the bit I really enjoy, right? So tech innovation as a technologist by trade all my life. And there's no one area that I enjoy to see it more so probably than healthcare. So the benefits to our personal health and well-being. And I'll just give you one example most recently from COVID, working with Imperial College Hospital. Um, they've been using our HoloLens 2, which is our augmented reality goggles, and they took those, and what they did is they enabled um, a doctor to wear them and do the rounds on the wards. And what that enabled, firstly, the challenges they were having was we're exposing all of our doctors and all our consultants to COVID patients, so they're now all at risk. So how can we reduce that? We've also got the challenges with personal protective equipment and the lack of it as well. So how do we fix that? And equally, we're in a very ambiguous space where we don't have a lot of data, we don't have a lot of information. How can we get more people collaborating around these patient conditions? So when we looked at that, we said, well, HoloLens 2. Well, I'm a doctor with a HoloLens. He walks around on a ward. He'll look at a patient. But back in a central room, it doesn't even have to be in that building. You have all the consultants and other doctors and other experts. They're able to see what that doctor can see. But not only that, they're able to then into his or her field of view, able to augment what they were seeing with data, with information. Here's patient care records. Here's some research that is appropriate for their condition. But also it meant that only one person had to wear PPE and everyone else is protected back in the room. So able to create that separation. So create this efficiency in their organization. Only one person was doing legwork. That person was able to be beneficiary of all those other experts' opinions in real time, whilst having all that information immediately in front of them. And then, of course, the reduction on PPE, which then meant they could just get on with their jobs. So that was really, really good to see. I love seeing that.
No, I can imagine you described it wonderfully there, and hopefully that's something more that we can sort of pick up and adopt. But I just wondered, from a social housing perspective, I know this is not your area of specialism, but I just wondered what a sector like ours could learn from other sectors about either the strategies for technology or the adoption of technologies, to bring that back into our space.
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, I think it's another area that I think technology is going to play such an important role. So again, I sort of think about all these disparate organizations executing on fairly sort of similar business process. So I'm sort of thinking about the use of automation, and we're driving a big joint strategy with government right now, looking at this more broadly across all the government organizations. So how can they consume more automated business process? And then really that's with the lens on things like intelligent automation. So then you sort of augment automation with things like machine learning. So then you've actually got a machine starting to execute on some of this with a human in the loop. So it's always still, someone verifying and then actually maybe pushing the button. But for the most part, data's collected and authority is given and all those things are done by an automated machine-driven process. So I think there's a huge amount of benefit there. I think as we digitize those business processes that we see executing across organizations like social housing, we're going to very quickly be able to observe the patterns. So what are the sort of repeatable, standardized way we should be doing things? And then we can just almost drive a one size fits all model there, where you get massive efficiency, cost benefit, a lot of rigor around how that operates. But then equally, where's the parts, those sort of dusty corners where we see innovation occur and where we see people starting to go outside standard governance and do something amazing? How can we quickly bring that back into the center and allow everyone to benefit from that? So for me, it's really about sort of digitization and the telemetry around that, the sort of business processes that your organizations have to execute on every day, and the intelligence we can get from that.
That's a really good sort of example to sort of finish with there, Glenn. And I know we're going to be working with you over the next year with our CIO forum as well. So hopefully we can tap into more of your experience and insight around that. But for this DINCast, thank you very much for your time, sir, and your contribution. Really enjoyed that and look forward to working with you in the future.
Great. Thanks very much, Ian.